How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Hot Takes with Holmes here on Radio Free Radford. Glad you could join us on this chilly and snowy day up here on campus. My name is Blake Holmes, and I'm here with my co-host Isaiah Adair. Stick around with us. We're going to be talking about the recent action around March Madness and the NBA and the league of the NBA basketball. Starting off with March Madness, as I said last week, my favorite time of year personally. We have had a little bit of a different tournament, something that we haven't necessarily seen before. A few things have happened. I don't know if my bracket has ever looked as bad as it does this year after the round of 32 going into the Sweet 16. So I'd like to just take this time to read the round of 32 matchups. I'm not want to go all the way to the round of 64. Just going to read through the quick round of 32 and what got us really to what we are now in the Sweet 16. Which, speaking of which, Sweet 16 games will start back tomorrow night. After a few days of a hiatus within the tournament, they will start back tomorrow night. At the top, I'm going to start with the South region. UMBC, the darlings of this tournament, becoming the first 16 seed to ever beat a number 1 seed in Virginia, lost to Kansas State. Lost.
First 16 to beat one in men's basketball.
Correct. Thank you. It's really worth mentioning the 1998 Harvard women's basketball team was the first NCAA basketball team to do it. However, UMBC was the first male college basketball team to do it. Thank you for reminding me of that. They lost actually in the round of 32 to the Kansas State Wildcats, 50-43. Still, I don't care if they lost in the second round. They're a living legend, and they'll be that way for the rest of time, really. Especially. Kentucky, the Kentucky Wildcats taking out the Buffalo Bulls, not the Bills, the Bulls, 95-75. A game that wasn't even close. Not much to say about that one. Big shocker here, Loyola Chicago knocking off the Tennessee Volunteers, proving why they're the ultimate Cinderella in this. Sister Jean's really happy. They won 63-62. Nevada, the Wolfpack, taking down the Cincinnati Bearcats, who I said on the show I was not high on. I actually had Tennessee beating Cincinnati in the next round. Well, Cincinnati got beat, but not in the way that I had planned. And Nevada makes it to the Sweet 16. Florida State knocks off the number 1 Xavier, the Musketeers. I say every year I don't give them enough credit. The year I finally give them credit, they lose in the second round. I don't know what to think of this Xavier team, but props to the Seminoles. Gonzaga taking down Ohio State. Gonzaga is no stranger to the NCAA tournament. They've earned their dues here, and they get a win here against the Buckeyes. The Michigan Wolverines hit a shot at the buzzer, personifying what March Madness really is. Hit a shot at the buzzer against Houston, and they take home the win over the Cougars, 64-63. Texas A&M, the Aggies, destroyed UNC. Like, it wasn't even close. And this was a game that I thought could go either way. I actually had, I'm hot in this Texas A&M team right now. They're looking very good. I think George W. Bush saw something in them too. He has them winning it all in his bracket. So, good call there. Villanova beating and destroying Alabama. Another game that wasn't even close. I feel like in this round it was either close or it was going to be down to the wire. And Villanova was one of those examples, taking out Alabama, the Crimson Tide, 81-58. West Virginia, again, blowout, beating Marshall, the Thundering Herd, 94-71. So the Mountaineers make it to the Sweet 16. It'll be a 1v5 matchup. Texas Tech beats Florida by 3, 69-66. This Florida team I wasn't very high on. This Texas Tech team I am very high on. It's possible that this region could get a Big 12 matchup and the Elite Eight. So that'll be something to look forward to. But Texas Tech will have to get past Purdue, who knocked off Butler 76-73. Another close game right there. Purdue is playing without its best player right now, their star center, but they barely get past Butler. They got a big matchup coming up against the Red Raiders. Kansas knocks off Seton Hall, a game again closer than I would have expected, 83-79. The Clemson Tigers proved they were the better form of Tigers as they just ran Auburn off the court. It wasn't even close. 84-53. That's one of the worst losses in really Auburn history. And Bruce Pearl might be in trouble just because I know he had a good season, SEC champions, but that's just embarrassing to get beat. You're a 4 seed and you got beat by 30, by over 30 by a rival in the NCAA tournament. That just can't be allowed. The Syracuse Orange, I'm sorry. I'm going to take this time out. I apologize. I thought they were going to lose in the first four. Here they are in the Sweet 16. They knocked off my champion, Michigan State Spartans, 55-53. Jim Boeheim laughs in everyone's face again, says he's got what it takes to get his team to at least the Sweet 16. And my upset that I picked for this time didn't work out as Duke dominated Rhode Island, 87-62. So that was the round of 32. That got us here to the Sweet 16. And the Sweet 16 goes Kansas State versus Kentucky, Loyola Chicago versus Nevada, Florida State versus Gonzaga, Michigan versus Texas A&M, Villanova versus West Virginia, Texas Tech versus Purdue, Kansas versus Clemson, and Syracuse versus Duke. So what game in there sticks out to you is going to be one that's a must-watch for this upcoming round in the tournament?
I actually think there's two of them, just because I think there'll be hard-fought battles. One, Loyola Chicago versus Nevada, two teams that people had losing early. I think it'll be interesting. I think the game it'll be relatively high scoring. Not going to be a huge defensive battle, I don't think, but it's going to be a good game. And then my other one would be Villanova versus West Virginia. For me, I'm from West Virginia. I'm a huge West Virginia fan. But it's going to be interesting because West Virginia runs a very similar defense to what Radford ran in the first round, the round of 64. And Villanova completely dismantled them. So I think it'll really come down to if Villanova can get off to that hot start, hitting 4 straight three-pointers against West Virginia, like they did Radford, to take the really early lead. So I think that'll be a game to watch, just because my connection with West Virginia and Radford, same defenses, same opponent.
I do agree they play a similar scheme, but at the same time, West Virginia's defense is unheard of, is otherworldly. I mean, there's not many, if there is any, NCAA basketball teams that play better defense than the West Virginia Mountaineers. And Bob Huggins knows exactly what he's doing, other than maybe the Virginia Cavaliers. But my game to look out for, honestly, this one, because of the familiarity, is Syracuse and Duke. These are two teams that's played each other. This is Coach Mike Krzyzewski versus Jim Boeheim, two college basketball legends going at it once again for what seemed like several times in their careers. And I think Duke wins this game, but I would not be shocked to see Syracuse. And I mean, I've doubted them all tournament long. So let's see let them show me what they're capable of. And I do agree with you in the Loyola Chicago and Nevada game, though. That's going to be a battle of Cinderellas, and most likely, in my opinion, they will see who gets to play Kentucky in the next round, and we'll see. And Sister Jean doesn't have them going past this round, so let's see if Loyola Chicago continue that run and get back to the level of, let's say, a Davidson team did back in 2008. So, and kind of tying into that, who do we believe is a serious, of all the teams that we have left, who poses the biggest threat to go on a run at this point and win it all with the teams that are remaining?
Michigan. Michigan is, if I can remake my bracket, I actually filled out the second chance bracket. I filled out one of them, and Michigan is my winner. Just because, I think they're going to have a tough road, because if they beat Texas A&M, which was a tough matchup, they're going to have to play either Zaga or Florida State. I think Zaga will win that, and it's going to be a hard-fought battle. And it's going to continue to be, even the next round, going to the Final Four. If they make it that far, it's going to be a very, very competitive rest of the tournament for them. But, I mean, we saw what they did last week against Houston, who was a very good team, hitting the buzzer beater to win it all, to win the whole game. Like, I don't know. There's something about the Michigan team. There's just a fire underneath that team. And I don't know. If I had to pick right now, I would pick Michigan.
I've actually got two. I do agree with you. Michigan's a good team. However, I can't single out Villanova. When you've got a playmaker, you've got playmakers everywhere. That Villanova has, the 3-point shooting they have. All it takes is they got to see that first shot go down, and it's almost over from there. That's how good and confident they are. You saw how they played in the first two rounds. Granted, again, the first round was against Radford, and they played Alabama, but Alabama still had a polarizing figure in Colin Sexton. Alabama still had a good. This was a team that we said was going to be an underdog in this tournament, and they beat them by over 20. Almost 30. So just looking at the talent levels, and again, Jay Wright always knows what he's doing. Villanova, I think, has to be one to look at. And the other one to me, just because they've been a little bit of a surprise to me, is Clemson. Clemson coming out of the ACC. If you told me to pick you 3 teams in the ACC that would have made it to the Sweet 16, Clemson would not have been one of those teams. It would have been Duke, UNC, and maybe someone like, let's see here, maybe someone like a Florida State, something like that. I wouldn't have necessarily thought, or maybe even like a Miami, but it wouldn't have been Clemson. And they've really proven, again, ever since I saw what they did to that Auburn team, they are playing some fantastic basketball right now, and I think that could continue if they can get past Kansas, which I think if they get past Kansas, which I think could happen the way they're playing. Kansas had a little bit of a lagging game, struggled a little bit against Seton Hall, but Clemson coming out of the gates with a dominant win. So will it be Kansas who bounces back, or Clemson who continues their reign? And I think that could be an interesting game to look out for as well. So flipping the script a little bit, now every tournament has those things that we like to call Cinderellas. And there have been plenty of them this year. But who is the biggest surprise team this year in the tournament? So who had the biggest run? Who's had the biggest run? Who had the biggest game that you weren't necessarily sure? Or who just collapsed? Who was going to go far that you didn't expect to go down the way they did? So I want to start with you, Isaiah. Who is the biggest surprise in this tournament so far?
I have to go with the team I had winning it all, Arizona, and their collapse in the first round. Because, for one, everyone knew eventually a 16 seed was going to be the number 1 seed. Did we know it was going to be UVA and UMBC? No one even knew what UMBC stood for. So, no, we didn't think it was going to be that. But we knew it was going to happen eventually. Didn't expect it to be that dominant fashion. But UVA also had an important injury, a key injury. But if you look at Arizona, they lost by 21 to Buffalo. The Buffalo Bulls. You hear the Buffalo Bulls, you think it's someone actually mispronouncing Buffalo Bill, most likely. And you just see Buffalo lost the next round to Kentucky by 20. So I think that just shows just how big of a meltdown Arizona had, how big of a collapse they had, and especially for me, having them as the favorites to win the whole tournament, and they lose by 21 in the first round to a 13 seed, who then got beat by 21 the next round. Like, that's just insane to me. So that Arizona's got to be my biggest surprise, just because they collapsed.
When I think of necessarily biggest shocker in a way, what do you think of when you think dominant March Madness teams? You think of your Dukes, you think of your Kansas, but to me, a major team that comes into play is UNC. And in a way, both of the teams between Texas A&M and UNC, Texas A&M, I was high. I really liked this Texas A&M team. I didn't expect them to beat UNC by 21 points in the round of 32. I didn't expect them to get past UNC, let alone beat them in the fashion they did. And again, UMBC is always worth mentioning. I think we kind of wanted to take a little bit of a cop because that was a little too obvious in a way that we could just make it part of our answer. But the idea that Texas A&M has a chance to go and beat a team that was trying to get back to the Final Four for the third straight year, the fourth straight year, get back to the national championship for 3 straight years. They were trying to do that, and to do it in the dominant way they did and have a chance to play a Michigan team right now, that's going to be the biggest surprise to me. And also, I mean, I really thought Michigan State was going to go farther. That doesn't necessarily a huge surprise to me because second round, you never know what's really going to happen. And also Syracuse is another surprise to me. Again, it seems like every year there's a team I don't give credit enough. I think that they're going to get beat in the first round, and then they go to the Elite Eight, Final Four, and I'm standing here looking like I was the dumbest person in the world. Granted, looking back, it might have been foolish of me to say they wouldn't win in the first 4, but I didn't expect this Syracuse team to make it all the way to the Sweet 16 and potentially knock off Duke to go to the Elite Eight. So I didn't expect that. Speaking of never seen that, never expected that, the never before seen South region. This has never happened before. In that Sweet 16, there was not a single team that was in the top 4 seeds in the tournament left in this region. It goes, the highest seed left is the number 5 Kentucky Wildcats. Then it jumps down to the Nevada Wolfpack at 7, the Kansas State Wildcats at 9, and then Loyola Chicago at 11. So I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's on there have been lots of upsets in NCAA basketball, but there has never been one where a tournament where literally 4 teams, the top 4 teams in a region, none of them made the Sweet 16. And those top 4 teams were obviously UVA losing in the first round to UMBC, Cincinnati, the Bearcats, which I said I was not high on, the Tennessee Volunteers at 3, and the Arizona Wildcats at the 4. So what does this mean for college basketball, and what does this mean for those teams left? Like, how do you approach this knowing that you don't have to play a top team anymore? You're playing teams that you thought that the people that made the bracket thought were more your skill.
I think it shows a lot about the bracket, the bracketology, like the making of the bracket. Because if you look at the East, out of the top 5 teams, like you have this 1, 2, 3, and 5 seeds. So it's like the complete opposite. Like in the South, you have all the lower seeds, or not all, but 4 lower seeds, and then in the East you have 4 higher seeds. I think it just shows like the bracket making. But I think the South, I mean, it just shows like how small the margin of talent is in the NCAA. And I've noticed that like with the number 1 team in the nation, UVA, losing to the someone that would have been ranked. I read somewhere would have been ranked like 100 and something possibly in the nation. Like it just goes to show just like how small the margin of talent is. And like we talk about, like in the NFL, they say the best team in the league is probably just a few players better than the worst team in the league. A couple plays a game difference, because that's how close the talent-wise everyone is. And I think it's showing that college basketball, even though there's a ton of teams, so many more teams, it's pretty much the same situation. Because I think if you take like a star player off one team and put it on a team with other solid players, it can change the whole dynamic. That there's not, the talent spread is not as like, top heavy.
I'm going to tell you, this South region hurts me because, I am a Volunteers fan. They did lose to Loyola Chicago. However, what does this do? You want to ask me, what does this mean? This is March Madness. This is what makes March Madness so great. In that, you go and watch you mentioned the NFL. If you watch the NFL playoffs, the minute it starts, like a good example this year, when we saw the Chiefs and Titans to take each other on in the wild card game, do we really expect one of them to make the Super Bowl? In the NCAA tournament, almost anyone has a shot. Has some kind of shot. And just this, do you think Loyola Chicago came into this tournament thinking we could actually have a chance to go to the Final Four without playing a number 1 seed? Do you think that Kentucky came in and would have said we could have to get past a 9, at the worst case scenario for them, get past a 9 and a 7 to get to the Final Four? No, I don't believe a team ever thought that, but that's what makes March Madness so great, is that this doesn't happen in any other sport. The only sport that maybe you could consider that is baseball. In the wild card game, and in that playoff system, if you have a couple of aces, you have a couple of pitchers, you can just pitch them over and over and over, and you can win a World Series that way as long as you can get to the postseason. However, other than that, there really isn't another sport that does this. College football playoff, for example. Say college football playoff, for example, you've got you don't get a chance. You have the 4 best teams, and you're not shocked if any of them win the NCAA tournament because it's the top 4 teams. In NBA basketball, Golden State almost swept the entire playoffs last year. Like, there is not another sport. And even baseball, I mean, the Chicago Cubs winning their first World Series since 1906 or 1905, excuse me. Oh, I'm wrong again, 1908. But when you take a look at when they won the World Series, they went to the World Series, they went to the playoffs. You said that's your team to beat. That's the team. Chris Bryant's pumping them out of the ballpark. Anthony Rizzo's hitting really well. Jake Arrieta's finding his footing on the mound. You knew this team was one to look out for. Same thing with Houston last year. Same thing with the Dodgers, who met them in the World Series last year. I mean, you can have your favorites all you want, but March Madness, when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the crunch time, and even this year we've proven not even ones are invincible in the first round, as we may have thought before. It's happened. You can finally start picking 16 seeds now. It's happened. So that's this region is just a prime example of what makes March Madness great, in my opinion. As I mentioned, Radford basketball, they lost in the round of 64 to the Villanova Wildcats, blown out, but that's kind of a result we all kind of expected. Villanova, hot start, they were just making literally, it almost seemed like if they could have thrown it from the other side of the court from three-point range and it would have went in. But let's not forget, Radford had a historic season this year, 1-1 in the Big Dance, the first NCAA tournament win in school history after winning against LIU Brooklyn in the first 4. So they can hang their heads high knowing that they did win an NCAA game. They won the conference that they were projected to finish seventh in at the beginning of the year, and they're returning players. They could have the chance to do it again next year. So props to them. It's been a historic season, and we can't wait for next year. So, what are your thoughts on this season, and what do you look for next season?
It was insane. I'm looking forward to just the maturity, the growth and maturity from the young players, like Hicks, Hicks, Fields, Carleek, and even Ed's going to be a senior next year. Ed Polite, but I mean, he as a junior, I think this probably was his third year starting. Seeing how great he is, like probably his third year starting because I'm just first year here, but I mean he's going to be a senior next year. Dominant player all over Sports Center for a few different games this year, and then posterized someone on Villanova during the the first round of technically their second round, the round of 64. Completely posterized someone in a tough loss. I think just the maturity, and now they have some experience under national spotlight underneath the light of the NCAA tournament, and some experience can go a long way. The Eagles hardly had any experience in the NFL playoffs. And I know it's completely different, but at the same time, like experience matters. That's why Syracuse is is making a run because their coach is experienced. So I think it'll go a long way next year.
Be something definitely to look out for, especially in the Big South. Teams aren't going to lie down for them next year. Last thing we're going to do for March Madness this week, we're going to do kind of like the second chance that ESPN did, but we're going to redo we're going to repick the Sweet 16 from here on out. So, Isaiah, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. So let's go from, let's see here. You have the first game. Would you rather, let's start in the South. Let's just start from the South. And the first game, Kentucky versus Kansas State.
Don't call it an upset yet, but Kansas State is my pick. I haven't been able to buy into Kentucky all year. Honestly surprised they made it this far because I expect them to play against Arizona, of course. But, I mean, they beat a Creighton team that was expected to beat them. And they played, and this might sound funny now, or would have before, but they beat a pretty good UMBC team by 7. Obviously beat UVA by 20. And then UMBC lost to Kansas State by 7. So I think Kansas State, it's going to be a close game regardless. I think all the games this round are going to be close. But I still say I think Kansas State wins a close one. Might come down to a buzzer beater, maybe just a point or two, but I give Kansas State.
Usually we're pretty even at first, but I'm going to go with the opposite. I'm going to go Kentucky here. As you were just saying, experience matters. I like Coach Cal's experience in this game. I think that Gabriel from Kentucky has a big game. I know experience. I say that experience matters. It's a team bunch of freshmen, but I think the coach's experience matters a ton compared to player experience here. And the fact that Kentucky's probably feeling confident right now that they don't have to play a top seed in this tournament. So I'm going to go with the Wildcats over the Wildcats. Kentucky over Kansas State in the first matchup. So the next game is Loyola Chicago taking on Nevada, two Cinderella teams. Nevada's not necessarily Cinderella, they're a 7th seed. But call me a believer, but I'm going with the Ramblers. I'm having the Ramblers getting past Nevada, even though I think it's a very close game. I think Nevada's no pushover. They've proven that to me in this tournament. However, Loyola Chicago gets past Nevada in a nail-biter at the end of this game.
Okay, I got to go against you again. I pick Nevada for only one reason. I can't pick against Sister Jean. The power of prayer got them to the Sweet 16. She's a team chaplain, 98-year-old woman Blake was talking about earlier. But I don't know. I gotta go with Nevada just because she doesn't have them making it past the Sweet 16. And I'm honestly someone who had Loyola Chicago going to the Sweet 16. I'm afraid to pick against them. I'm afraid to pick against them at this point. So yeah, I'm going with Nevada just for that reason.
Florida State taking on Gonzaga. I know you kind of spilled your pick a little bit earlier, so I'm just going to go ahead and run through it. I agree with you. I think Gonzaga is going to beat Florida State. Florida State played a very impressive game against Xavier. However, like I said, Gonzaga's been here before. Gonzaga's been, in fact, they went to the NCAA championship last year, and I think Gonzaga beats Florida State by it. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a wider lead than people may want to think. So Gonzaga wins pretty big.
I think it'll be single digits, but I'm going Gonzaga, like I said earlier. It might be 9 points, still single digits. But yeah, I'm going Gonzaga there.
Michigan and Texas A&M. Based on your talking earlier, I think I know what you're going to go with. So I'm going to go ahead and say if you'd like to go ahead and start.
Yeah, obviously, Michigan, I said, would probably be my favorites. And don't keep me to that. I might change it. As I'm going through the matchups in my head, I might end up changing that around the Final Four. Michigan, I think will beat Texas A&M. Again, a super close game. Might come down to another Jordan Poole buzzer beater. I do like Texas A&M. The fashion they destroyed Kentucky or UNC in. I could see them winning the game, but again, I think Michigan's going to pull off something incredible at the end again because they're the team of destiny right now.
4 games and 3 differences. I'm going with Texas A&M in this game. Call me a believer. No, not many teams do that to UNC. They gave them Roy Williams his first 20-point loss in his career in the NCAA tournament. That's unprecedented. That's never happened. UNC has played Duke in the NCAA tournament. They've played several other great teams this tournament, and they've never lost by more than 20. Texas A&M did it to them this year. Give me the Aggies. Give me the Red Hot Aggies against Michigan. I know Michigan beat a very hot or a pretty hot Houston team. However, a game that really, and it was a heck of a shot, don't get me wrong, but he probably makes that shot 5% of the time. And March played the cards right. And that 5% happened. But give me the Aggies going to the Elite Eight. The Villanova Wildcats taking on the West Virginia Mountaineers. I kind of ruined this earlier as well. Give me the Wildcats. I like Villanova going all the way to the Final Four, going all the way to the championship at this point. And I really don't think I need to explain a ton about that. West Virginia plays fantastic defense, but I think. And it's always the age-old tactic. Defense wins championships, but a great shot beats good defense every single time. And I think Villanova has that shooting power to be able to overpower that defense, so give me the Wildcats.
Again, in another close game, as much as it pains me to say it, the Mountaineers are going to go down to Villanova. And it's like Blake was saying, like a great shot beats great defense, and it's because no matter what position you're in, if you don't block the shot, it has a shot of going in. I think you actually told me that during the Nova Radford game, and it's so true. Like if you don't block the shot, you can still get a hand on it, you can still get a finger on it, but as long as it's up in the air, it still has a shot of falling. So I'm going Villanova just because those guys shoot lights out. Michael Bridges and then Brunson. And even those other dudes.
Jalen Brunson's probably to me one of the most impressive college basketball players out there right now.
And like against Radford, I'm sure you guys watched that game. They had some white dude that was making everything he put up from 3. And I was honestly getting aggravated because I was like, why isn't Radford covering? And even when they switched up and they started playing man, they were, had someone on him. Like, he was still knocking things down. So, I don't know. It's incredible. I think Villanova's going to win. They're loaded.
Texas Tech taking on Purdue. I don't want to say this. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to say this as a joke, but I'm not going to be serious. I'm not going to be like Seth Davis with Virginia. But Texas Tech, Sharpie. I like the way Texas Tech's been playing so far a lot. Purdue, missing their star player right now. I don't like their chances against the Red Raiders. I think Texas Tech, Sharpie in this game, tough matchup in the next round against Villanova.
That's a good question. Purdue, I had making it very, very far, I think, to the Final Four before the injury.
I did have them in the Final Four as well.
Actually, might have been the championship. I know I had them losing to Arizona in the championship in my original bracket, I believe. But I don't know, the injuries. We saw with UVA how paramount injuries are. Even if it's not a player that might not be a starting five, might not be a star player like DeAndre Ayton or like Brunson. But I don't know. Texas Tech is gonna give Purdue fits. So I don't know. I'm kind of pulling Texas Tech there too.
Kansas taking on Clemson. Here, I think I technically already picked one earlier, but here's my upset. Give me Clemson. I'm not high on Kansas, honestly. I'm really not. Like, out of all the Big 12 teams, honestly, Kansas won the Big 12 championship. Don't get me wrong, and they're a fantastic basketball team. But Clemson's playing very hard right now. And as I said, Kansas coming off of a win where they only beat Seton Hall by 4. Whereas Clemson's coming off of a win where they just beat a rival by over 20 on the biggest stage you could possibly have. Give me the Tigers.
I'm going the other way. I'm going Kansas because just experience in the spotlight.
Bill Self.
Big games.
Bill
yeah,
Self is
so,
one of the most polarizing coaches you can have, so I will agree on that part.
And Kansas, they always have talent year in, year out. It's because of the experience. People know they're going to make at least a relatively deep run, make it halfway through the tournament. So it's like the recruiting power that Duke, UNC, and Kentucky have. There's so much recruiting power in knowing you're going to be deep in the tournament. So it might be a guy that might be coming off the bench and end up shining in some way, because it's going to take heroics to beat Clemson. But I think Kansas does win.
Syracuse taking on Duke. I've talked about how I haven't given Syracuse enough credit. They'll be happy to know I'm not going to give them credit for this game either. Blue Devils win big. Grayson Allen gets into it from beyond the three-point line. Marvin Bagley has a big game in this game. Watch out for Duval, the point guard as well. Give me Coach K and the Blue Devils.
This is where we differ, my friend. Call it an upset. This is probably my biggest. I picked some upsets earlier. I picked Kansas State, but anyway, I'm picking Syracuse. I can't buy into Duke. But Bagley is a monster. Allen, super good, like you said, Duval. But I don't know, I can't buy in. Syracuse is going to ruin their season more than St. John's could have with just the upset early in the regular season. So I'm going Syracuse.
Hey, if you're a Syracuse fan, you don't want me picking your team. You saw what happened when I haven't picked your team so far.
Exactly. That's another reason I'm going Syracuse.
Moving on to the Elite Eight. Kentucky taking on my bracket. I'll just go read off my bracket at this point, and then Isaiah can read off his. So from my Elite Eight on, Kentucky taking on Loyola Chicago. I have Loyola Chicago winning this game as well and making it to the Final Four, becoming the I believe it's the third or fourth 11 seed to ever make a Final Four. So, I like the way they've been playing so far. I had them losing the Final Four, but they can I think they go all the way to the Final Four. Gonzaga taking on Texas A&M. Texas A&M, again, I'm high on them right now. They get past Gonzaga in this game. And as I just mentioned, Texas A&M beats Loyola Chicago in the Final Four. What a Final Four matchup, and at that point, too, 11v7. Not something you would think of, but give me the Aggies. Villanova beats Texas Tech, even though I think Texas Tech's a pretty good team to pick right now against Purdue, but I like Villanova right now, and I think they get past the Red Raiders in the Elite Eight. Duke gets past Clemson barely. I don't think it's by much. This is a much closer game than you think, but it's probably a 1 or 2 possession game, and Duke gets past the Tigers. As I said just now, the Aggies do beat the Ramblers, and Villanova makes it back to the championship for the second time in 3 years after beating the Blue Devils. And in the championship, Villanova gets the win over the red-hot Texas A&M Aggies, 68-64. So, from the Elite Eight on, what is your leftover second chance bracket?
Okay, the first matchup in the Elite Eight, I think, will come down, like I said, Kansas State to Nevada. And I think Kansas State will win that game. Not by too much, but I think it'll be a good game, too. But I think Nevada's run ends there. Kansas State with the victory. And then Gonzaga versus Michigan. I think Michigan pulls one out just out of nowhere. Like I said, against A&M, it's going to be late-game heroics, but I think Michigan can do it. Extremely close game. Wouldn't doubt going to overtime, and honestly, Gonzaga could pull it off. Then I have Villanova playing Texas Tech. I'm going Villanova with that one, just because they're insane. Like we said a second ago, great shot always beats great defense unless it's a block. So Villanova there. And then Kansas against Syracuse. Syracuse run ends in pretty handily fashion, I believe. And Kansas takes them down. So after that, I would have Kansas State and Michigan in the Final Four. I expect Michigan to win that game. Not by too much. I'd say 5 to 7 points, just because fouling out late in the game, trying to foul, put them to the free throw line just to try to have a chance. I think Michigan will pull that one off. And then Villanova versus Kansas and Villanova. Pretty close game, I think it would come down to it. I think it'd be interesting to watch. But I have Villanova. So the championship would be Michigan and Nova, and super close game. Honestly, Nova might have it, But just because I said earlier I have a feeling Clemson's going to win or Michigan's going to win it all, I'm going Michigan. Even though I don't know, Villanova is a dangerous team. So Michigan, yeah.
Well, they have for our Sweet 16 brackets. Again, games do go back live tomorrow night, so be sure to look out for that. I believe the South region's first up in that. It might be Loyola Chicago, and they play tomorrow night. But look out for that. March Madness is starting to come to a close, and we're gonna miss it. But this is one of the most fun times of year, so be sure to tune in. Moving on to the NBA. The things that I wanted to talk about first is the MVP frontrunners. Who do we think at this point is going to win the MVP award? I have a feeling we both are going to say the same person because I think it should be unanimous at this point. But I want to go ahead and let you start first, just so that way I can say that.
Well, at first I don't think it'll be unanimous, just because you have guys like Anthony Davis.
I agree in that sense, yeah. But I meant it's pretty obvious right now who should be the main front runner. So.
Yeah, because you can't argue how important Davis is to the team after Boogie fell. But yeah, I think clearly the front runner is James Harden, and unless it's some crazy late season slump, and even then if he slumps, he's still going to be outperforming most starters if he does hit a slump. Honestly, so James Harden's the obvious favorite.
Yeah, I have to agree. James Harden's been. You can make a case that he's been snubbed from it for 2 years straight now, and I think after a season where he's actually improved, never thought that he would actually improve on what he's been doing, but he has. Only thing that's really down, and it's not even by much, is his assist numbers. He's averaging 31.2 points per game, 8.7 assists, 5 rebounds. And, I mean, he's got a 30 player efficiency rating. It's ludicrous what he's doing for Houston right now. And you can make the case Anthony Davis is more valuable to his team. But what do we know about the polls? They look at team success almost just as much. Russell was a little bit actually of an enigma last year. But I think Russell, the only reason he won the MVP award is because, obviously, he averaged a triple-double. It's just something that's never been done before. AD's been having a stellar year. He's not quite having the record-breaking or the type of stat line performance-wise that Russell had last year that really gave him the MVP award. However, you can't deny Anthony Davis has been crucial. After Boogie went down, the Pelicans are now still fighting very well for the playoffs, something that a lot of people thought would never happen without Boogie this year. And I didn't even think it was. I thought they were going to collapse, and I didn't think that team could really function because I didn't really know about their depth. I thought it was all on those two. But AD's took it on himself, and he's really made his way in there. But I do think that James Harden needs to be looked at to finally get his MVP award as of right now.
Yeah, and like you mentioned Russ, and you mentioned Harden's assist totals falling too. But I think that just shows how much of a team player Harden is because, yeah, Russ puts up those assist numbers. But when you're working with arguably, it might not even be much of a debate, the best pure point guard in the NBA. I would be concerned if his assist totals stayed as high as they were and didn't fall any at all, because you got to put the ball in the best. Obviously Harden's the best player, but you got to put the ball in another playmaker's hands to open things up for you and other teammates. I think Clint Capella's having a good season, but just his willingness to give up some of his numbers to CP3 to have him dishing the ball out and making his shots. I think it just shows how valuable Harden is, because you might have a guy like Russ who wants the ball in his hand all the time, and he's not willing to give up those numbers.
A little bit of an exciting night in NBA basketball last night. Starting out, the Toronto Raptors traveled to Orlando to take on the Magic, and they won 93-86. Probably the most exciting game of the night, Oklahoma City traveled to Boston. The Thunder taking on the Celtics, and the Celtics won this game 100-99. However, it really didn't look like they were going to, as with, I believe it was, they were down a certain number under 25 seconds left, and Marcus Morris hits a three at not quite at the buzzer, but sank the Thunder late, and it was a heck of a shot too. Pump fake, step back three. Fading, and it was a heck of a shot. Boston wins 100-99. The Los Angeles Clippers traveling to the struggling Timberwolves. However, you wouldn't have thought last night, the Timberwolves took care of the Clippers pretty easily, 123 to 109. Boban Marjanovic making a little bit of an impact for the Clippers in this game. The Dallas Mavericks traveled to New Orleans. Dallas is in full tank mode, I think, at this point, honestly. New Orleans is fighting for a playoff spot, and it showed. New Orleans won by 10, 115 to 105. The upset of the night, the Atlanta Hawks took down the Utah Jazz in Utah, 99 to 94. Did it without even scoring 100 points. So Jazz were on a hot tear too, and this could hurt them a little bit because that puts them in a little bit of a disadvantage compared to the rest of the seedings. You can't lose games like that down the stretch, especially if you're going to lose. You need to lose to your front runners. You need to lose. You just cannot lose to a bottom feeder like the Atlanta Hawks right now. The Detroit Pistons took care of the Phoenix Suns very easily, 115 to 88. Phoenix is the worst team in the Western Conference record-wise, and Detroit really proved that last night. And finally, the game of the night, the Houston Rockets taking on the Portland Trail Blazers. Portland was hot, red hot, and so was Houston. And James Harden and Chris Paul, they took care of Damian Lillard, and CJ McCollum, combining for over 40 points together. So Houston took them down in Portland, in Oregon, 115 to 111. So, again, something we like to do every single week here on the show is our hypothetical for the day. So, this one's a little bit of a different twist because we're not quite thinking of this at these days, but I still wanted to get your opinion on this. I want you to place yourself in LeBron James's position. Obviously, you have so many NBA teams that are going to come throwing money bags at you for throwing whatever they got at you to come play for their team next summer. If you're in his position, what exactly do you think LeBron should do in the upcoming free agency?
Well, first I'm going to look at talent of other players on the teams, and he has kids, like something that it may not be too far from home, and if it is in a homey neighborhood, I don't know. I kind of, even though it's not really a homey place, but I think I would choose Philadelphia. Complete the process. They're the 6th seed in the East right now. But you want to go to a team where he's not the one doing everything. Because he already said he feels like he should prolong his career to where he'll be playing with Bronny. And by that, he can't have the whole workload on him. But if he goes to Philadelphia, barring if Markelle Fultz comes back, and not even in the draft class, but Fultz at the 1, if he comes back to form, but Fultz at 1, I don't know who they'd have running the 2. But then the 3,
JJ Redick would be the one running the 2.
Redick would be 2.
It's right now.
Okay, so Fultz, Redick, then you have Ben Simmons, LeBron, and Joel Embiid. That would be dangerous. That would rival Golden State, no doubt.
That's with Dario Saric also coming off the bench at that point as well.
So that would be insane. So I don't know. I think Philadelphia, if I was LeBron, that's where I'd go. Not too far from Cleveland, so he's not making a huge move. I would go Philadelphia.
LeBron's values are going to be tested in this free agency because you have to come down to it. Do you want to pull what a lot of people may call a Kevin Durant and go to Golden State, or would you rather make another super team to rival Golden State? And I think if you could find any way possible without losing a ton of money to do it, you go to Houston. You go with James Harden, and he's already said it, him and Chris Paul are very close. He wants to play with Chris Paul in his career as well. So, can you imagine that squad? Chris Paul, James Harden, LeBron, coming up Clint Capella. Like, you have playmakers, you have three-point shooters, and as you just said, a team that LeBron wouldn't have to do it all. Well, he wouldn't have to with this Houston. In fact, he'd be doing far from it. It would be one where, and LeBron, there might be a little bit of the same type of thing that we see in Oklahoma City, fight over the ball between those three players. But with the companionship and the teamwork that him and Chris Paul could develop over their relationship in their entire careers, I think that would be an interesting development right there. The teams I don't think he goes to specifically, and the teams that he's like narrowed it down to, I don't think he goes to the Lakers. I really don't think so. He wants to stay away from as far away from LeVar Ball as possible. Nothing against Lonzo. I don't think he has anything against Lonzo, but especially if I'm LeBron, I don't want all that negative. I already have enough negative publicity thrown on me for no reason. I don't want LeVar Ball putting even more of that on me.
See, the reason I can't buy into him going to Houston, I think it'd be a great move. And even the Lakers, as much as I'd like to see him wearing a Lakers uniform, LeVar Ball would be the decision breaker there. But I think when it comes down to, yes, there's always the argument, oh, LeBron plays in a watered-down Eastern Conference. Yeah, there's that. But, even people that make that argument, like I've made that argument. But even when you look at that, if someone goes like 13, 14 straight finals, whether they win them all or not, you can't deny that greatness. Whether it's a good conference or not, you can't deny that. So I think he might try to stay in the East just because it might be a cakewalk to the Eastern Conference to the championship. But I mean, still, like if you go to the Western Conference, you might be guaranteed a spot in the Western Conference Finals, but that's all. So it doesn't go past that because there's teams like if he goes to the Lakers, if it happens, and there's Houston and San Antonio and OKC and Golden State. If he goes to Houston, there's still those other teams. So I don't know. I think he stays in the Eastern Conference.
That's kind of what I mean. Like his values are going to be really tested because does he really want to stay in the Eastern Conference where he doesn't have as much competition, or does he want to prove that he can compete in the Western Conference? So it's one of those things. His values are definitely going to be tested. And we're going to see what he really thinks of whenever this summer rolls around.
I wouldn't blame it either way. If I was a player, I'd probably be thinking the same thing. So.
If you're a player of LeBron's caliber and the accolades that he's collected his entire career, it really doesn't matter at this point. We all know that he's potentially, and to me, most and probably going to go down as the greatest basketball player to ever play the game. So, there's not much else for that he needs to prove. However, does he think that he needs to prove that he can compete in both conferences? That's where Houston can come into play. But that's left up for interpretation, and we really won't know until the end of this season. Speaking of playoffs, as you just said about mentioning guaranteeing a spot, speaking of playoffs, in the Eastern Conference, the Toronto Raptors still hold the number 1 seed with the Boston Celtics trailing closely behind. The Cleveland Cavaliers have retaken the 3rd spot from the Indiana Pacers, who now sit at the 4th spot. The Washington Wizards are chilling out at the 5, with Philadelphia at 6. Miami takes the 7th seed, and Milwaukee's all the way down to the 8th seed right now. Honestly, that's a little bit of a matchup to look out for. If the season ended today, that'd be a Raptors-Bucks matchup. I think that'd be an interesting one to look out for in the first round. And straight out of the Western Conference, or I'm just going to start calling it the Gauntlet because it's insane. You have your 2 clear cuts. Your Houston Rockets and Golden State Warriors are the number 1s and 2s respectively. Then it gets heated after that. The Portland Trailblazers still standing strong at the number 3 spot. Oklahoma City climbing up to the 4th. New Orleans down to the 5. San Antonio back down to the 6, even though they were at 7 last week. Minnesota going on a little bit of a, like I said, they won last night, but they've been on a tumble lately, and that's what happens when you lose a player like Jimmy Butler, and they're down to the 7th seed. And Utah also losing last night, going to the 8th seed. So the wild, wild west right now. I just want to point out that if you look at standings right now, each team is within, almost each team within the playoffs is within a game of each other. Portland's ahead of the 8th seed. The 3 seed is ahead of the 8th seed by 4 games at this point. The 4 is ahead of 2 games of the 8th seed right now. So, and then you go to the 9 seed, the Denver Nuggets, and the 10 seed, the Los Angeles Clippers. They're both 2 games, 2.5 games back of the playoffs right now. So this is an insanely close playoff race. And if you take a look at the teams, that we have here, who do you think? Let's say the 7th and 8th seed. Who gets those last 2 spots?
I honestly think that Utah goes up to 7, and Denver takes the 8th seed, and Minnesota falls out of the playoff race while Butler's hurt. Just because you said, like, a player with Jimmy Butler, like, what else do you expect? You have big playmakers like Cat and Andrew Wiggins, but Butler he's just so dynamic. And I expect Utah's going to maintain what they've been doing because they've been dominant at certain stretches of the year. And Denver, I honestly think they have a good chance, especially if Minnesota slides. Denver, I think, will scratch and claw for that 8 spot.
I gotta tell you, I am a Nuggets fan. If they want to make the playoffs, they have got to stop losing to subpar teams. They have a gauntlet of a schedule coming up, and you've got to win. Let me tell you their last 3 losses. They lost to the Lakers, they've lost to the Mavericks, and they lost to the Heat. And again, the Heat, they are a very good team. However, you cannot lose those games to the Lakers and Mavericks when you're pushing for the playoff spots right now. So I think Minnesota does slip, and I think the Jazz do move up to the 7. I think Minnesota falls out of the playoffs. But it's a race between the Nuggets and the Clippers for the 8 seed. And what is that number one thing? Now, the Nuggets do play the Clippers one more time this year. If you're Denver, that is the biggest game of your NBA season. You cannot afford to lose. If you lose that game, the Clippers hold every single tiebreaker over you that they possibly can. I think that given the edge, and I believe the last game will be at Pepsi Center, I will say the Nuggets get the 8 seed. I'm not so confident in that pick. I really think that the Clippers kind of have their number this year. The Clippers have played very, very well against them this year. Boban Marjanovic embarrassed the Nuggets last game, excuse me. I do believe that Denver could rally and get the 8 seed, especially with Minnesota falling out of the playoffs. But I also wouldn't be shocked to see Minnesota find enough ground to get the 8 seed and stay there. But, that's left. We'll have to see what happens. The NBA season's in full swing, and what I like to call it when the postseason starts. The NBA season really begins when the postseason starts. So it'll be interesting down the stretch. And I think this is a playoff race that may not even get decided until the last night of the entire regular season.
Well, it comes down to whoever gets those last 2 seeds. I mean, let's be realistic. Like, they play Houston, Golden State. They probably won't make it out of the first round. Odds are, I give them a very low percentage to make it out of the first round. And if Golden State, finds, if their players heal, I honestly think they're just sitting out for a rest. But, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the right to lose, like Radford was fighting for. It's the right to lose in the first round, pretty much.
And the ultimate question when you're a team like the Nuggets or Clippers, would you rather play the Warriors or the Rockets at this point? Because if you could find a way to get past the Jazz up to the 7 seed, which is still in reach, I'm looking right here. The Nuggets have 11 games left in this year. So, do you want to play the Warriors or would you rather play the Rockets? If I'm the Nuggets, honestly, I'd rather play the Warriors. Because if you look, what has been, obviously the Nuggets have played the Warriors better this season. They've beaten twice this year. But if you take a look at it, what beats the Warriors? A dominant center, a playmate, a game-changing center. The Rockets, every time the Nuggets have played, every time anybody plays them, there really isn't much of a weakness there. Whereas Golden State just has sometimes a hard time stopping a dynamic center. And the Nuggets have that with Nikola Jokic. If you're the Clippers, I don't know which one you'd rather play. However, I think this is a playoff race that gets decided the last night of the season.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it here on Hot Takes with Holmes from Radio Free Radford. I'd like to thank everybody for listening. If you liked what you heard, be sure to tune in next week, once again, here at 3 p.m. on Radio Free Radford. And be sure to like our Facebook page. We're also on YouTube, where all of our broadcasts are uploaded to. Should have this broadcast uploaded by tonight. So find us at Hot Takes with Holmes on both of the sites. For my co-host Isaiah Adair, my name is Blake Holmes, and we'll be back next week here on Radio Free Radford.